We're going to start this panel by introducing ourselves. Myself, I'm Dea Sujadi. I'm from Golden Gate Ventures. I run the Indonesian operation. It's an early stage venture capital, 35 portfolios in total globally. And that's it. Next. Chakra?
Hello everyone, my name is Chandra. So I'm responsible for running a medical supplies e-commerce to hospital and clinics in Indonesia. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrew. I'm from Busy. Busy is actually a B2B marketplace and purchasing platform for enterprise and also small medium company.
Hi, good morning everyone. My name is Irwan. I'm from Ralali.com. We are a B2B marketplace as well. We're trying to focus on connecting the suppliers and the buyers, especially the big suppliers to the small SME business. Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Hari Sungkari. I'm from Badan Ekonomi Kreatif, the Indonesian Creative Agency of Indonesia. This is a government ministry, just from 2015. I'm also just joined the government. Before I run my own software company, also in procurements, and it's still going there. So it's my time to help the government, to help you. I hope I can help you all. Yeah, I can create this opportunity, e-commerce, creative economy, and I'm asking each and every one of you here to help me to create the Indonesian e-commerce. Thank you.
Okay. So the questions that I'm going to ask is mostly you. Each of you, if you feel comfortable, you can say something, and if you can add. So we'll just keep this as a flowing discussion, right? We'll just be chatting. Okay. So it's estimated that the global B2B commerce market to reach $12 trillion US dollars by 2020. How does each of you feel towards such estimate? You know, has the track record for the past few years support? So what do you think this trend like going to be for the next few years? B2B e-commerce market.
All right, I guess let me just take a first step towards that. I think if you looked at from all the publicly available sources regarding, obviously there are many resources that is trying to estimate what is the actual size of B2B e-commerce globally. I think I've seen number from 5 trillion back in 2014 all the way to 4 trillion to 6.5 trillion. Now, that was in 2014. If you look at 2017, that the same source quote that size should be about 7.7 trillion. So that means every year you have compounded annual growth about 6 to 7%. Now, if you use that same growth for the past 3 years, 2014 to 2017, and use it to extrapolate all the way to 2020, I think that figure mostly closer to about 9 to 10 trillion as opposed to 20 trillion. But again, they're just using what's the past and you extrapolate in the future. But I think, in all honesty, the potential is there. If you want to take a more of a conservative approach, the figure would be about closer to 9 to 10 trillion. But if you want to be more aggressive, then I think 20 trillion is by all means is not unrealistic.
What about, follow-up question, Indonesia. How do you feel in terms of, contribution towards those numbers based on the past trends, or what's it going to look like for the next few years?
The growing size of SME in Indonesia is pretty exponential. I think we have about 50 million small medium enterprise in Indonesia that leads to a bigger market in Indonesia. And also the trend of B2B has switched into more commercial. It started with classified as a B2B, where only listing is there. We cannot capture the GMV and everything. And it shifted into a marketplace and an e-commerce. Then it will goes into more vertical marketplace, where the supply chain will be the main challenge there. And definitely it will be a lot bigger than in the next couple of years and so on.
Yeah, just to add some different angles on the B2B potentials. So from medical/healthcare supply chain, I think there's not much contribution, yeah. For medical device alone, last year, it was the total expenditure for medical device was only about 1 to 2 billions. So I don't think it will contribute a lot from the vertical from medical side. But I agree that Irwan said yeah, evolution of the B2B commerce platform will evolve from early like listing company like Indo Trading more beyond like MBs, Ralalian, and towards that will create more new ventures like a specific vertical e-commerce. One of it's like just like us. Yeah.
Can you state again the issue?
In terms of Indonesia, what's it gonna look like for the next few years?
Okay. So for the, well, before I joined the government, I was also a mentor in some incubators. So mostly the startup companies, the young startup company was focused on the B2C because they were inspired by those unicorns, with 1 million followers, 1 million users, and that. But it's not, I think it's not going to be the next opportunity, The next opportunity would be, the question would not be how many users you have, but the question would be how is your profit? It's more important, And it's also going to have a lot more startup that focus on B2B. Because if you go to B2B, you have a guaranteed revenue. You have a contract, you have a purchase order, and I think the funders, whoever it is, or the loan or the bank, would be very much prefer to have that. So this is the next. And then e-commerce, I believe also that the mass market platform, I suggest not to replicate them because in a lot of countries, the mass market there is only 1 or 2 e-commerce platform. So the winner takes all. So what I think they have already started good, become more niche. We need a specialty in a marketplace like fashion, or maybe you need a marketplace fashion for fat women. There is nobody serves that kind. Well, fat women like also to like looks beautiful and everything, or a farmer as well. So we need all this e-commerce that goes back to the basic.
Going back.
Actually, so let me just try to provide more color into that future B2B here. If you looked at globally, right, using quoting from the same statistics source, that globally B2B e-commerce is about 7.7 trillion as of 2017. If you looked at B2C, it's actually less than a third of 7.7 trillion, so it's about 20 trillion. Now that trend, if you actually zoom in into each of the country and you look at all the developed B2B e-commerce market, for the likes of US, I think 2015, that B2B e-commerce, actually just so that we're in the same perception, B2B e-commerce is actually defined as any transaction between company that is conducted digitally. Now, in the United States, that figure in 2015 is actually estimated about 780 billion US, which is 2.3 times the size of B2C there. Now, then you even dissect it further. Out of the 780 billion, who are the top contributors, right? You look at the top 5, the numbers that will come in the States that is contribute the most to the B2B e-commerce back in 2015 was Chevron, ExxonMobil, Apple, and General Motors. Now, then you looked at China. China, the size of B2B e-commerce in the same year is actually about 1.2 trillion, which is 2.7 times B2C over there. Then the question is, if you apply that multiple 2.3 to 2.7, roughly about 3 times, you apply it to Indonesia, whatever the size of B2C in Indonesia, say 2 to 3 billion estimate, including online ticketing travel, the potential B2B e-commerce actually 3 times that. So we're talking about the figure 6 to 9 billion. So the potential is there, But I think where we are now, I think a lot of numbers been thrown around, but I think the bottom line is potential is huge.
So for Indonesia, what are the popular sectors that you think are mostly going to be contributing to that numbers you were saying?
Okay.
I will.
Well, obviously, the sectors that will contribute the most are, if you looked at the from category point of view, obviously starting from all the commoditized, standardized products such as IT, electronics, which is pretty common, commoditized, standardized everywhere. But also, we start to see that this growth now tap into the area whereby standardization and commoditization lacking, such as, I think Irwan would be the best person to opine, which is MRO, or maintenance, repair, and overhaul. These are very high volume, many customization needed, a lot of pain points for the enterprise customer, and this is actually, the more pain points there is, obviously the more opportunity that there is. And I think we're seeing that now the growth actually tapping away from all the commoditized product into much more customized, hard to find, bottleneck, low visibility product, such as one of them is MRO. MRO entails general tools, machinery spare parts, and so on and so forth.
Surprisingly, is the trend that I saw in Raleigh in the last couple of months. Automotive is picking up as well as one part of the high growth categories. Building material is there as well, because as you can see, President Jokowi, like, the policy they have is very focusing on building infrastructure in Indonesia. It leads to a lot of building materials category to growth exponentially. Another one is automotive, where it's a lot of repeatable products there, like lubricants and bearings. That's something that push those categories into a very significant growth in like 2017 in Raleigh action. Yeah.
According to the data that I have, the most is trade in through e-commerce are first fashion, second is electronics, and then food. Yeah. So from the creative economy point of view, but those are not necessarily Indonesian product. Okay. So my objective to have on all the e-commerce all Indonesian product, fashion, food, craft. But we need to look very keen what kind of products. So the American people or everyone outside Indonesia said Indonesia has advantage of being a craftsman. So we don't go into mass product craft. So fashion, batik, woven, everything that is crafted is going to be the next feature, yeah, for Indonesia e-commerce. For the food and culinary, even though it's already contributed the biggest in the creative economy, but it's not yet tradable through e-commerce because a lot of them have not been touched by technology. So imagine if you want to order soto, you know, but they don't have a good packaging yet, you cannot sell that through e-commerce. So this is now our role also, by an economic creative, to empower them, to incubate them. So there are certain areas that we have to touch them. First, the design. So in the culinary, the food is not just good to taste, but it's taste, but it has also to good looking. So you have to create a good packaging, so to make the people interested to buy that food. And then consistency of production. Like the small medium company they are good when we order 10 items or 20 items, but when it came into 100, 200s, they're not ready for that. That we call it consistent. And then packaging. They're also good at packaging, and then delivery. They are not also experienced because they used to sell offline where the buyers come to their shops, but not through the online, they have to deliver that. And the last is they are not used also for transaction without cash. That is the area that we have to cover then. And each area, each village has its own potential. So that is the next era of the e-commerce from the creative economy side.
I see. Okay.
Can I add something from Pak? I mean, Pak always seeing this as on the demand side, but I mean for the restaurant, for the food service, they need sourcings. The product they source is huge. I mean, it's repeatable. It's have a lot of potentials like all the food ingredient, the flours, the oils. That will be a huge market in Indonesia, especially the growing of a restaurant and a small warung in Indonesia. And I think it's very tempting to get into that vertical, I guess.
Yeah. We have a special program for that. We call it Food Startup. We have run that from last year, and we connect them with the investor as well. Food Startup, if you ever heard that.
Yeah, I've bought products from the
Yeah.
businesses. Okay, I guess we can go back to what exactly is the role of the government to support this e-commerce, a B2B e-commerce ecosystem.
The main
as
role
well?
of the government, this Badan Ekonomi Kreatif, is to set the ecosystem. Yeah. We are not the businessman. We are not going to train people. Yeah. I always act that the government is not an intellect person. So we have to work. Yeah. This is one. My mindset is not government is not the most intellectual peoples. Yeah. But the role of the government to find the right partners like you. So we work together with the academic, with the business, with the community, with the local government. And we build the ecosystem from 5 value chain. The early is the creation, production, distribution, consumption, and conservation. So background is to have a duties from upstream to downstream. Yeah. So we cannot just come to a village and train them to be a good craftsman. That's not enough. We have to equip them with a design skill. We have to connect them with the market. One of their concerns always that they said government always come to us, but what should we do after this? Why should we sell our product? That is their most concern. So I think it's my role to connect them with the marketplace, and this one of these is e-commerce. Not all of them can do the trading. Yes, some of the area we work together with the community, and that community association will work together with them. Some of the places will delegate the digital side to their son or daughters, to the young generation, while their mom still doing the works, but the son is a lot of there is no one solution for all, but we have to look very details what the real problems, and we try to find solution. And we don't work alone. We work with association, with universities, with businesses as well. So the main mission of Badan Ekonomi Kreatif is collaboration. We cannot work alone.
So I would like to add something. Over the course of the trending course of the B2B commerce, I think the government has, I think, essentially helped startups, new B2B startups into the B2G commerce. Like I think Andrew might be able to explain more while your tenure in MBIS, LKPP. So LKPP is, I think, one of the realizations of ideas of B2B/B2G e-commerce. So far, from the development of the LKPP e-catalog, I think some unfortunate events is that no one really knows that area. So the only players who are there are just like typical big giant players. No single like small players would want to jump into that space because of administrations, not knowing the information of LKPP and so on. But I think LKPP can be one of the options that would help us as the private sector to enter to or expanding our B2B e-commerce. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so actually during my tenure in my previous company, we actually did a lot of business, or we participated in the B2G space. Now, LKPP is obviously one of the government vehicle, main and only government vehicle for private sector to be able to serve the government, the public sector. And actually, over the past 5 to 6 years since its inception, growth has been very tremendous. I think it's in the high, almost like 20 in the 20s percent level. Now, obviously, LKPP does a lot of in automating the front end part of the ordering, cataloging, ordering, standardizing the specs, content, and so forth. But I think a lot more, it can realize enormously a lot of this untapped potential by actually automating the back end. Obviously, all the, as mentioned, the administration process is still very, very manual. And yet, later on, once the government order, and then how you're gonna send them invoice for billing is actually a lot of them still manual. So I think automating that part of the process, the back end, will realize almost double the efficiency that LKP was actually intended to be at the first place.
Going back to what Pahari was telling us earlier about backcraft initiatives and all that, for those of you guys who are running marketplaces, you deal a lot with small and medium businesses, retail players and all that. Do you think the initiatives that they're working on, is it any helpful? Anything that they could be, helping these businesses to move forward, push them to grow, to be at a better position and compete?
The initiative done by Bearcraft is very helpful, especially on changing the mindsets of people on going online. If you see Indonesians as the whole country, especially in the suburban area, the literacy of technology is very low, and educations of the markets and changing the mindset of how technology could help them penetrate and expose their product into a larger market is very important to us. By having technology, I hope all the small medium business that was incubated by Bearcraft could have a fair access to better suppliers in the bigger city. That's one of the Ralali's missions, to be the sourcing part of small medium business, and not only from the Indonesia, but for the international suppliers that get into Indonesia, to be able to supply those goods to the SME in the suburban area. I think that's very important as well. Thanks for the Bearcraft. We work together, I guess.
Ralali came to my office last year, and I was challenged them to help the Indonesian SME, and I think they did a good job. So everyone can copy from him. Yeah, last year he went.
So I guess we're also obviously aligned and on board with the message that obviously government alone is not enough.
Yeah.
All the constituency in that e-commerce ecosystem, stakeholders such as us, players, we also need to be able to collectively educate that segment. So just to give you a little bit of a case in point, obviously this is not SME, but then it's still also applicable to SME. I don't have the data point on SME, but on the enterprise level, when we onboard a client, a big enterprise that already has SAP as part of their ERP, they always focus firsthand, price, which is by all means is fair. But then the biggest gain out of automating transactions is actually 70% of the gain comes from the productivity that you gain out of the automation. Although yes, beginning they focus on price because that's very tangible, but a lot of people not realizing that 70% of the biggest gains actually out of productivity. But then we understand that the challenge of communicating that is that what is tangible metrics for you to measure that productivity, right? Now, the same thing also happens to SME. The SME is like one of the biggest challenge for us is actually how you make them aware that behavioral change is needed to transform what was conducted offline to digital. At the first place, it will be pretty painful because obviously it involves a lot of systematic behavioral changes. But then once you actually onboard the digital, that automation alone will actually enable you to actually gain more out of that productivity efficiency. So I think that's the biggest challenge for us to actually, make them aware.
I would like to comment on the educations, yeah. Well, people, I think nobody knows that Indonesian people spending more time on social media than the American people. Yeah, according to this survey that I got, every American is 1.6 hours every day on social media, while Indonesian is 2.9 hours every day. Average. Some of them is 10 hours, yes. The millennial maybe 14 hours, so yeah. So 2.9 compared to 1.6. But the 2.9, which is happening in Indonesia, mostly is done not for productive time, or are reading hoax, distributing hoax, yeah. Now, my job is turn them into productive, yeah. So I ask them, why don't you spend on social media selling your ID, selling your product, yeah, sharing your innovation, sharing your creativity. So sharing is the most. So we can share, and we can change it, and finally we can get economic benefit from them. Don't read hoax, I said. So that's the education. Education. It's one of the purpose number 74. It's one of the items. There is 7 pillars, and one pillar is education.
Okay, we're already running out of time. Do you have anything else to add for last?
Yeah, maybe flashing back a little bit about the hopes for how to really integrate helps from governments to us as private sectors. Looking a little deeper into LKPP, there are actually a lot of surprising facts, and something like this. I believe no one really knows that Astra actually have their own e-commerce and actually doing well in the LKPP sector. And there's another one-man show startup. It's an e-commerce in Surabaya who has a GMV of approximately 10 to 20 million. It's a 20-person team. And there's another one in Jakarta who produce like more than 100 million in a year because of being admitted in LKPP. So I guess I see a lot of interfering factors from the big boys to sort of like trying to hold their positions in the LKPP. So I guess maybe this would be the reference for Backcraft to actually sync up with LKPP regarding that, because the latest batch is actually just finished. So for IT and peripherals and MROs, just finished, and it's still in the process of admission. Yeah, so we hope that later on, for the next batch, I think it will be able to stimulate more smaller players to get into the space.
I will send that message to the chairman of LKPP, Pak Agus Prabowo. Yeah, don't worry, he's my friend.
Okay. Okay, the committee has been staring at me for the past 10 minutes. So